Siempre, ¿verdad? Que el informe no se presente.
He dormido 3...
Hola, buenos días.
Hi, good morning.
Buenos días a todos.
Hi, good morning to everyone.
Es un placer,
It's a pleasure,
en nombre del ICA,
on behalf of the ICA, to participate in the inauguration of this event. Thank CIMA to give us the opportunity to be here today in the event of Our Voices, a collective action against sexual violence. I want to take advantage of this moment to recognize the work being done by Aracima in defense of equality and safety in the audiovisual sector. I think that to have a report that provides data and gives evidence to reality is very important in order to undoubtedly adopt measures and to focus upon the context that we work in. Sexual violence in the labor environment is not, or work environment, is not an individual problem, but a structural problem that affects fundamental rights and the democratic quality of our institutions, cultural institutions. The audiovisual sector, as a driver for creating industry, a strategic industry in Spain, must be also a reference in prevention, protection, and accompaniment of the victims. You know that the Ministry for Culture, also through the ICA, has a clear commitment in the struggle against gender violence and sexual violence. In 2024, in collaboration with CIMA, CIMA, and other organizations, we created the Unit for the Prevention and Care Against Sexist Violence in the audiovisual and cultural sector. This commitment is a permanent commitment, obviously. The audiovisual sector has a multiplying effect. What happens within the industry has a repercussion on society and in the collective imaginary. We have to provide an example in the fight, an example in the eradication, and we have to give an example in the visibility and the support to the victims. It's important to have a joint involvement of civil society and administrations, and also companies, production companies, festivals, academia, professional associations and trade unions in the fight and the collective action against sexual violence. I would like to finish in this brief introduction launching a final message, making it clear that we have the firm commitment of the Ministry for Culture and the ICAA that we share with the zero tolerance towards sexual violence and the recognition of CMIA for opening up a path, a journey with this report, especially this event, which gives a voice to the victims. Is undoubtedly, I think this will be a reference in Spain and in Europe. Thank you very much. And zero tolerance to sexual violence. Thank you. Hi, good morning. Thank you very much to everyone for attending today. Thank you to the Film Festival and Mr. Rebordinos, Amaya Sarruya, who is also here, for making this event possible. Thank you, everyone, for having me along, and all the people that have made it possible for us to be here in this meeting. My name is Rakel Ezpeleta. I'm an actress, and I represent Hemen and Abe, Euskal Aktoren Batasuna, to talk about the protocol that we were preparing against sexual violence in the working environment and professional working environment of the performing arts and audiovisual arts here in the Basque Country. Well, I would like to manifest that feminists, we are against harassment and the abuse of power, no matter whatever way it happens, and we are against colonialism and genocide, as can be no other way. That's why we are. We want Palestine to be free. And we also ask for Palestine to be free, and we also ask all of the people who govern Spain, Europe, and the Basque Country to put all the means possible in their hands to stop abusing states like Israel, to stop genocide amongst us all. In our closer field from Hemen and Abe, we are trying to avoid violence and abuse within our sector and to prevent this, because it was something that we saw that was necessary from what we were receiving from our associate members in the association, meeting and to making a decision to set up this protocol. We looked for the means and the necessary financing and allies and partners, and we're glad to say that they opened their doors and added themselves to the project. The research group, ADI, of the Faculty for Communication of the the University of the Basque Country, like the Casegune cluster and the Emakunde Institute for Women in the Basque government. Thank you. Well, thanks to all of this support, we've carried out a study in the sector and a diagnosis. And before I forget, if you want to look in the QR code, the first one on the left, I think, there is a small mini report which contains some of the data contained from that diagnosis, that, as I said before, this diagnosis was prepared and we're starting to prepare the protocol from that report. It's important to say that the study, as well as the diagnosis, was carried out by Garazi Arregui, a researcher and journalist, and that will be made public. The diagnosis will be made public as of October, but what we want to do is to advance some of the information and data that has emerged. So I hope you can see it on your mobile. I'm going to give you some information, but the most relevant ones, and those are that almost 58% of the people surveyed in the study have had in-depth interviews, as well as a survey that was open to the entire professional sector of performing arts and audiovisual arts throughout the Basque Country, the Basque Autonomous Community, Navarra, and also this French Basque Country. The majority of the answers that we've received have been from women, but it was also open to receive answers from men and other people that are not identified with one gender or the other. And as I said, the first piece of information is that 58% of the people who were surveyed do not feel safe, do not feel that they're working place is a safe area in their sector, in their professional environment. And also 43% of the people who were surveyed have suffered some sort of situation of violence or some case of violence. 60% of the people have seen a situation of, have been present in a situation of violence, and 65.6% of the people who were surveyed, some victim has communicated or has told them of a situation of violence they've gone through within these sectors that I mentioned before. The type of violence reported most frequently have been psychological violence, sexual and physical violence, and also economic violence. And in this environment, and in this field, and as regards gender, because within the survey we asked about the type of violence exercised vis-a-vis gender, vis-a-vis sexual orientation, and vis-a-vis different issues. As regards to the violence highlighted due to gender, as I said, psychological, 59% of those women who suffered violence was psychological, 36% was sexual, 33% was physical, of another other than sexual, 31% economic, and then there was digital and others with less incidents. It's curious that between sexual and physical violence is almost 30%, 33, 35, 36%, but there's a difference between those that suffered and those that have been talked to them. I've gone beyond the time that I've been allotted. So excuse me, another piece of information is that most of the cases, 88.7% of the cases, this violence was exercised within a power hierarchy. The aggressor had more power than the person that was harassed or abused. 41% had a sufficient similar role, and less than 10% of the cases was a person which has less professional level to the one who had more, a higher level, professional level. I'm going to leave you the information here. You can consult it, this report, and to conclude by saying that now that we're going to prepare the protocol, we are getting in touch with the rest of the professional sector, with Epibaya, Askena, Bester, Calearte, Ade, Apica, and obviously all of the institutions, so that the resulting proposal can come to a consensus as much as possible, so that all of these organizations and professional agents can adhere to it, and for its applicability to be real and effective. And simply just remind you of this, that to perpetrators, we have to confront them using our voice against silence and impunity. And if a victim on their own can't do that because she is in a clear disadvantage, well, let's do it between us all as a society. Thank you. Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for being here. It's a very exciting day. Thank you, Camus, for accompanying us in this path, and the festival for taking us in this such important event. And thank you to all of the associations of GTI for being here, and Amaya Soria and Alvaro González de Molina for coordinating this, and more colleagues, women, for coordinating this so generously, this event. I'm here to talk about the representative of CIMA, the Association of filmmakers and audiovisual men and women for the report that we've made, which talks about after silence, impact of abuse and sexual violence against women in film and in the audiovisual world. It's the first report that talks about the impact of sexual violence against women in the audiovisual sector in Spain. This report emerges from CIMA as a need after the cases that came to the fore and the conviction that it was just the tip of the iceberg. From CIMA, we proposed to make a study, a rigorous study that could help us to understand the dimension of this violence that we were talking about, but to understand with data. It was important because only this way can we ask the institutions and demand them and the fabric of this industry, and that's why we're here, to bring about systemic, cultural, structural changes. The report that we took a year to make was prepared by Nel Rajola and Barbara Tardon, researchers that are here with us today. Thank you very much. And it's also based, and we think this is very important to highlight, in a methodology which is strictly and very mega rigorous. We needed precisely to combine a quantitative and qualitative methodology for the data that we showed, because I'm from another generation, that can be 312 surveys, 15 life stories, 4 discussion, debate groups, and research. It's tough. It's overwhelming. There are a lot of, it's atrocious. I think it's called, so let's say 198 pages. In the QR in the middle, you can download them, that I can't summarize in 5 minutes, but I'm going to try to limit myself to them. I'm going to share some brushstrokes with the hope that you can read it, or at least the executive summary. There's only 20, okay? Because it's really quite an impact. The information in the report is quite 63.3% of the women have suffered some sort of sexual violence. That is to say, more than half. And impunity is very high. 92% of the cases have not been reported. So nevertheless, these women that experienced some sort of sexual violence, 94% of them did tell someone. So therefore, we want to tell them, but we don't trust the system. The qualitative findings and the main conclusions, in turn, are overwhelming. Sexual violence are confronted by all professionals, and I think in all sectors, in the industry, in all of these spaces of the professional activity, especially even in private or intimate environments. The impunity system is sustained through labor precariousness that we know very well. The dependence of interpersonal relations, which is how our industry works, and the imposition of a narrative of silence and punishment for those that report. Silence brings about minimization. It's not that important. Irresponsibility of the victim. Perhaps you initiated it. We know this very well. Or the pressure due to the good of the project. But the film can't undergo this. Look at the rest of the colleagues that are going to suffer. We perpetuate a system where we question the victim, who's a survivor, directly or indirectly by them. You protect the perpetrator. The system not only does not sanction the perpetrators, but reinforces their power, and it reproduces their social legitimacy, consolidating a working environment which is insecure for women, because we're talking about work. We're not talking about leisure. We're talking spaces in where women are trying to work. That's to say that the only culture for cancellation that's in force is that which directly affects women in their professional development. They are the ones that lose their jobs. They are the ones that are thrown out and ousted. But sexual violence could generate impact in the mental and physical health of women, in their professional decisions and labor decisions on the short and medium and long term, sometimes wanting to leave the industry. Young women, LGBTQ+, or in a situation of vulnerability are especially affected. That is to say, and to summarize, I'm sorry to see your faces. You're surprised at what I'm telling you. Sexual violence are deeply integrated in the filmmaking and audiovisual which they've become naturalized and normalized as a part of the working environment. To form part of the sector involves accepting their existence and assume them as an inevitable consequence. This normalization process reduces the capacity to identify, perpetuating a system that makes them invisible and makes them legitimate. And I'm going to finish, but the report, basically what it reports, as we say, is a structural culture of silence and impunity sustained by the fear to reprisals, the lack of confidence in this institution, the absence of efficient mechanisms for protection. That is why the report includes a lot of recommendations for actions to public institutions, private institutions, ministries, autonomous communities, of course, to our sector, and that's why we're here today. So, in general, which is not meeting its due to promote working conditions that prevent offenses against sexual freedom, which is they're obliged to do in the Organic Law 10/2023. We encourage all the professionals in the sector to read this report, to understand the violence lived through by thousands of women when exercising their profession, and to all become in part of the solution. Thank you very much. Hi, good morning. My name is Blanca Rey. I am from the Andalusian Association of the Audiovisual Women's Sector. We want to thank the festival for taking us in, and our colleagues from the other women's associations. And in our case, we want to thank the Ministry of Equality that has been the institution that has made it possible to have a manual of good practices for the prevention of sexual violence and harassment in this filmmaking world and audiovisual world, recognizing the work that was being made by our colleagues of other associations in the preparation of action protocols, in the study of the impact of sexual violence that our colleagues in CIMA have just said. We were able to take a step back and say, we are working in the advance to taking care of sexual violence. We have the opportunity of building a manual of good practices where we'll bring about recommendations, real and effective recommendations for prevention. In this sense, we decided to work with methodology of research and action participation. So those are people that are subjects of this manual of good practices, were the people who are going to give us the clues and who are going to help us to build this manual and prepare the manual, which was the result of the collective work of women in our associations who are specialists in gender, psychologists, specialists in care for victims, journalists, and so on. As part of our participatory action research work, we set up an instrument and also with open interviews. This survey unfortunately reiterated figures that are common. In our case, we wanted to highlight 4 in our presentation. We want to highlight 4 figures which are quite an impact, caused quite an impact. 80%, 30% of the people who were surveyed have lived or have seen in first version situation of harassment and sexual violence in the working environment, in the audiovisual environment. This was done not only associations but professionals in Andalusia in the audiovisual sector. Of these 80%, when we said that only 15% were reported of these cases were reported, we're talking about of legal processes. We're talking about a report in the internal side. But the most dramatic thing about these cases of the people that were surveyed and who said yes, 0% of the cases were the results for the person, the perpetrator. So therefore this translates into 2 words which are significant, and I think it's repeated in most of the studies of is silence and impunity. then for us, it was very important, the perception of the environments, the perception of the environment within the audiovisual industry. For those that were surveyed, the people who were surveyed, nowadays, unfortunately, the shooting environment, specifically the situation when you're shooting a film, is conceived as one of the most safest places. However, the places that were most insecure were specifically cinema festivals and awards, especially the shooting trips and the casting situation. Why? Because these are situations where there exists a gray area from the point of view of the labor relationship, and plus, for example, in the situation like castings, there's a clear relationship of power imbalanced where there didn't exist nowadays, thanks to PISEA, the Association of Direction of Casting. There's a consent protocol, but it didn't exist at the time in which the survey was made. An action protocol which allowed to standardize the relationship and the process in the castings. This survey, the intention of it was for professionals to give us clues to identify what are the good practices that we could recommend. The first thing that we were able to identify as a good practice was to build safe environments within the audiovisual industry, but safe environments is multifactorial. That is one of the most important commitments is the companies themselves. They organize productions and festivals. They should undertake the prevention of harassment and sexual violence from consent. The feeling of professionals is the action protocols are a requirement, and they're just a piece of paper that is placed on a wall, sent through an email, and quite often the professionals do not have any real knowledge of what are the protocols for prevention and action, and they do not trust the company to effectively apply the protocol and to protect the confidentiality of the victims. And on the contrary, the victim is going to be re-victimized. Secondly, the existence of protocols. Thirdly, the protection, confidentiality, and accompaniment of the victims. And more important, training and awareness of the teams and crews. In the audiovisual world, we have to be aware that harassment and sexual violence are real, they exist, and companies, the public institutions have to be the guarantors that the action protocols, the equality plans, and the measures of prevention, and action can be applied. We've got a lot to do, but obviously, these women's associations together, we're going to work in order to continue on this journey. Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. Now, we will share fragments of testimonies upon sexual violence delivered by colleagues in the film and audiovisual sector. They've broken their silence. They've generously shown us their stories so we can hear them. They have descriptions that are explicit that might injure the sensitivity of people. So before we read them, please, the colleagues that are going to read, thank you very much for coming. I need you to stand in a row here on the right, and now we will project a small video. A young woman, part of the crew, went out on a party with the colleagues. She woke up with a colleague on top of her and penetrating her. A colleague who she believed to be a friend. She shut up, she didn't. And it happened again, exactly the same thing a few days later. So therefore she told the people in production and the production director that the serious thing is not only is it standardized for us, but the environment didn't have. Years later, I told my partner of a question of harassment, I said, don't expose yourself. Sometimes you're too nice. They didn't believe us. They blamed us, or they asked us to protect ourselves more instead of questioning those that were exercising that violence. I remember that what was happening to me was a battle with my own mind all the time. It was like, on the one hand, my mind was saying, it's not that important. He's your friend. He didn't want to do it on purpose. He wasn't, mind wasn't right. The other side he says, he didn't give me the option to say no. Then on the other side, well, okay, if you've run it, you might not work in this field again, mainly because you've got anyone that can, it's just, it makes you turn things around and to believe that you're the one that can bring about problems. I was completely in shock. All of a sudden, there was a void, not only because of the rape that I've just suffered, but because, gee, I've got no one that can help me to earn a living now. So all of a sudden, it was as if the world came up on top of me because I had no option. So the first days I remember, I tried to think that's not important, it's not that serious, but of course I was in a state of shock. Albeit, even if you're 40, you're always the girl, you're always the beautiful girl, the darling. So therefore that's the first thing you have to confront. Our work. It's not the difficulty of handing in a shooting plan, but your producer saying, look, listen, darling, let's get together. And you're not a darling. So that's where it starts. That's where you know you've got a problem in front of you, which is not a working problem, because if you let the first thing go by, that level goes even higher. He took me to a cafeteria and he said, listen, this is easy. You behave well, and so therefore I approve your work, and you've got no problem, depending on how you behave. I went through a serious situation of terror because I come from a humble family and we needed money. And plus, it was a work that I loved. That experience of abuse was very powerful, clear and concise and direct, and I didn't know how to react, nor what to do and where to go. They asked me for a bigger breast. I've got two bras that are very tight. He allows me to have a good fun with, to say things in a certain way, very sensual, very stupid-like. So I think things lose from the costume and the physical contact. I want you to go down to show your neckline, and he puts a finger in it, and they touch you when there's a lot of physical contact. It touches your leg. Every time that I stopped him, it goes against me and he punishes me. He takes away characters, and with that in front of everyone in the meetings, he shows that I'm problematic, I'm the feminist, and so therefore it starts a hostile situation today. There's a lot of psychological violence. To not talking to you 5 days and then tell me to pick up his suit at the dry cleaners because I was a servant, and to give her budgets for the films. So therefore, I did all of the work as a producer, but I never had neither the credit nor the salary, nor absolutely anything. I used to say, I'm not going to go, I'm not going to go, I'm not going to go and leave because I want to show that I could do it. And the time when I said I can't handle it anymore, the person that came in after me, which was a younger person like me with much less experience, all of a sudden he's a delegate and assistant producer. He earned 3 times as much as me. And it was 2 years of psychological harassment and bad treatment. I heard it from him talking to another director. He said, well, of course, the girls nowadays, everything is abuse for them. I was highly protected by my mother. I had producers who always took quite good care of me, but I see very close up horrible things with underage girls to ask sex for work and so on. And the mothers of the younger minors and the mothers did it for their daughters. This is crazy. To say, well, okay, for my daughter not to do it, I'll do it. I remember a dinner of the managers that I was a president of 6 years ago that I arrived late because I had to do an interview for a documentary. When I arrived, I said, sorry, I apologize. One of the managers said, thank God you're here, because if you don't give me a blowjob before a meeting, I'm no one. 6 years, an adult woman in a professional environment having to listen to something like that. And always the recurrent phrase is, where are you going to go without me? You're an intern, as if you brought me out from the street. As if I didn't know how to read. How were you going to go if I bringing you from the street? Everything you have is due to me. It's something that happens with all the women around me. I think that with women in general. I had a vacation because I like to make films, and I knew I wanted to be the first. But as a person in the industry, you're mature. And this had a repercussion on many things. I couldn't relate myself in the industry in the natural way. It's because I was a woman, and this affects your life very much. The first scene that I shot as an actress, what happened was a part of my G-string. I shot it with a finger, but the director came towards me in the rehearsal and in front of everyone. He pulled up my G-string and dropped my pants. He said, this is how. And supposedly that this should be a good memory. He works a lot nowadays, and I don't work that much. In a film that's well known, I was an art director. Sexual violence that were in that shoot was brutal. Direct violation. There was a sequence that was shot within a brothel, and I had to go and locate brothels. There's no way of shooting within one. One of the one, they were able to shoot, and they chose a person that was quite unpleasant, and the actress was obliged to maintain a direct relationship with the most horrible man in the world, with the camera team working in the crew. Not a sequence with a physical separation, with a study how to do it. I'm insinuating, no, that was direct penetration. And people like this director have continued to be and to have a name and to still make it ahead in their profession. From the outset, even in the building of the characters, I noted a resistance and violence in the way in which they discussed the story. I remember that the producer said to the women, they like to be hit, and when I want, I'll show it to you. And I'll bring you here a lady who's going to tell you that she likes to be hit. It's a public character. The trial is going to be public. Your name is going to be filtered. Why do I have to go through this? Why do I have to spend 20,000 euros court case? Why does my name have to be public? This industry, it's very difficult to make a name of yourself. It's complicated. I was going to say this about the actor. No, I didn't want to have another surname. It was fine determining my professional career and my privacy that I was not going to have anymore. I started to have anxiety attacks constantly when the next film that I was hired for, he was going to be there. No, you have not reported, so they're not going to do anything, especially with a recognized actor. The person that's responsible is you. If you talk, you're going to be fired. You're going to be dismissed. You're going to lose. They say they'll protect you, but it's true. The problem is you're the problem. Sexual harassment, I've suffered it when I was assistant for a director in the 90s and 1890. The idea was that we women were sexual objects, and if you worked, you could be an object. They said in a loud voice close to you, look, in a day's time, I'm going to be able to have it off with her. In the 1970s, at the end, the concierge in the radio every day would reference how good you are in looking at your breasts. Public TV was a nest of machism, and theoretically they think it's only right-wings, the bosses, for example. They are the people that get together to talk about the women in the teams. But then you have the left wing, the progressive people. But if you don't go to bed with him, you are always, you are so-and-so. When are we going to fuck? On the bus. Come to my house, in the lift. Why don't we fuck? Constantly, this is what they were saying. This San Sebastian's Film Festival here, I met the person who attacked me, my perpetrator. We were both accredited for. I've reported this. I'm waiting for the court case to come through. But every time I have a relationship with some professional is from his area and territory, I'm afraid he's his friend. I always question whether I should come to this film festival with the fear of seeing him again. He said, you've got a incurable mental disease. He made me believe that I had no solution. And so therefore, I came to such an extreme situation of isolation, so bad that I injured myself. I resorted to injuring myself. Other with sexual aggression, I received physical aggression, which was very powerful, and he fell asleep. He manipulates me, saying that he's perpetrated this to recover from my anxiety. I blame myself. That night I was about to commit suicide. I almost jumped off the balcony. I said, this is it. This has no solution. My balcony didn't have any bars, and quite often he said, jump and I'll finish everything. I'm going to jump through the window. I was 13. I was small and I was going to fulfill my dreams. It was my first film. I met him in the casting. He collaborated with the director. It was unbearable, but I didn't know what that was, why it was happening to me. In a wardrobe test, costume test, I had to wait. There weren't any cars. No one was available. But he offered gallantly to do so. I didn't know how far it was from the hotel where my mother was. But I spent 45 minutes in that car. And he started to talk to me to calm me down, and slowly but surely he started to touch my leg. He continued to talk, and I moved, and he kept talking to try to touch me between my legs. That's when I started to cry, and I threatened that I was going to jump out of the car. And I threatened that I was going to jump out of the car, and he didn't stop. I opened the door, and then he stopped. I ended up being on the footpath, walking to the hotel where my mother was. It was 5 minutes. I don't know that at what time in that path that I forgot all about this story forever. 10 years later, I met him in a well-known square in the city where he lived. He said hello. He was a director, a relatively well-known director. And after saying hello, I fell to pieces. I remembered everything. I couldn't believe it, and I almost fainted. Who am I going to tell? Who am I going to tell? Who's going to believe me? And this stays within me. This pain stays within me forever. Violence, verbal violence, as I say quite often. From upper echelons, they talk with violence. Managers and directors and assistant directors talk with a lot of cruelty. I love my profession, I love my profession, but this industry is horrible, and it's very difficult for me to find teams and crews where respect is very important, and it's very difficult to find this. He appeared one day at home. Without saying anything, he raped me. He threw me onto the floor, and he didn't allow me to breathe. It was horrible. I said, leave my house. And I went to the corner of a room, and I curled up, and I said, leave, and don't talk to me for the rest of my life. And he went away laughing, and I didn't understand what had happened to me. I feel like an imbecile. But these are very strange processes, because you're not raped by someone as known. It's an incredible violence exercised by a person you know, who's the father of your daughter or son, and if he was a monster for everyone, it would be very easy. But as he's only with me, well, that's what I thought. The humiliation is so large, and it's a shame that's so large that you feel so dirty and so horrible. And it was like, what have I done? Because I opened the door to him. It doesn't occur to record maintaining sexual relations knowing that I had a problem with my image. I now have a scopophobia. I'm afraid of a camera if it's being recorded and to be observed. I always hide myself. So therefore, in the therapy at the most vulnerable side, he obliges me. I record my genitals maintaining sexual relations because if I didn't, he said, you're too close. You've done it with everyone but with me. You remember, you have no fucking idea of sucking a cock. That's the name of love. I didn't consent. I gave in due to coercion to avoid conflict. I don't want you to record me. I'm dying. But the proposals started to scale up to situations that denigrated me, like defecating in the camera. I was a very reserved person, and he did everything that vulnerated me and violated me. Everyone knows, everyone comments and asks. You ask people and they say, well, okay. But why doesn't anyone do anything? Silence. But if everyone knows that this guy man does this, why is he still here? I was in catatonic. I was walking for 6 hours a day, non-stop, convulsively. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep. During the months that I was with him, I used to perspire at night. Something that never happened to me. I think it was because I was in a state of continuous stress. I turned into I also had suicidal thoughts. I tried to find a way to commit suicide, a mixture of horror, shame, and unbearable guilt. I called 016, desperate to find help, because the truth is I didn't know what was happening to me. And of course, in my head, all the time, it's not that important. It's my fault. You're exaggerating. You're crazy. When I explained what had happened, they told me, you walked up into that house voluntarily. Psychologically, I'm not prepared. I'm sorry, she's speaking in Catalan now. There's no translation from Catalan. This is not clear socially. One of the weapons that I've been using is an argument that we don't report it. It's not true, because if it was true, it would not be reported. What makes it's a pity for me, and what hurts me is I trust people, and this has destroyed everything, because I don't trust others. I'm afraid of men, of course. I'm panic. Yes, I am afraid. To what extent am I have atrocious fear of being hurt, because this person has destroyed me? The sequela I have is I don't trust anyone. I don't know how to explain it, and then I feel it more physically. I have physical symptoms. My body shivers, and I'm hypervigilant. A lot of anxious and stress, palpitations. My body shakes like every time that I have under moments of real stress. I connect with this trauma. I'm afraid of losing my jobs, of being indicated, to becoming the person that reported, for there to be controversy around me. I have the horror of people finding out. But on the other hand, I had then a big need of telling the story, not only to my friends, but for it to be known. We had to record a scene as if we were fucking, and then those images were going to be projected in a show, and and a close-up of my face on top of the actor. I had the director right in front with the camera in his hand, and he made me get undressed from the bottom up because he wanted to see my breasts, obviously, and he managed to achieve it. I was only 22. I took months to try to report. When I talked to the lawyer, all of a sudden she recommends that I shouldn't do it. It's difficult to demonstrate. You're getting into a problem here. And I said, no, it's not worthwhile. I spent 2 months. It was so heavy on my mind to live in this. I said, no, I can't live on this with this anymore. It's so heavy to report that, to not report, so therefore I'm going to do it. And that's the key moment. I'm going to make it public, to know my name, my face, and to know who it was with. What you don't expect is that it's always going to be your name, your face, and his, just initials, and there was never going to be a photo. You receive the reprisals, and the actress always loses the jobs.
Eu mesma dou-me conta de que me teño que educar, cambiar un pouco ese chip que, aínda que o recoñezo noutras compañeiras...
She's speaking in Galician now.
Cando che toca identificalo en ti mesma e levas tantos anos dando por feito que iso non é abuso, normalicei tantos comportamentos que creo que me segue custando identificalo a día de hoxe. E ao mellor digo, non sufrín violencia sexual no ámbito laboral. E se vos escoito, resóanme as cousas e digo...
The speaker is speaking in Galician. Until we finish with the law of science, until our women are not fearful to talk to a superior, to saying, this has happened, if you don't trust your colleagues, that's the real problem. I would start with schools. I would start with the producers and people who are directly involved to get involved. All the colleagues that received aggression have not communicated it because they didn't feel safe in that space. I suffered a horrible situation in a shooting of a film, and I decided not to report until the end. I went to the executive producer and I said, I'm going to report. Is now? What for? The project is finished. And I said, yes. For the next person that reports is not going to be the first person to report. Yes, it was harassment. I only hope that it happens to me again, or I see someone that it happens to, that we've created a system in which we can manage to have much more strength, the certainty of the harassment than the fear that I felt. After listening to the testimonies, we would like to briefly give you 3 key ideas that we've been able to demonstrate in the report. The first, has been mentioned by Almudena, is the culture of cancellation. Not only does it not exist for men, but it's only for women and in their professional careers. When we talk about sexual violence, we can't separate the work from the author. We have to make it political from a feminist standpoint, as well as you can't separate sport from genocide. On the other hand, the testimony is a political transforming event that allows us to identify sexual violence, makes it possible to know what has happened to us, and it makes it possible to build a collective story of memory and love each other and repair each other. When we're constructing collective memory, we're repairing ourselves. And in this sense, we believe it's very important to talk about cinema as the producer of representation and significance, and as these representations are deeply sexist and patriarchal and misogynist, the power of cinema and the power of representation is in our hands. We have to enter into what's symbolic. Many women are represented here in the field, in the industry. We have to intervene in the narratives, reassign the stories, build our own narratives from a feminist perspective and take it without permission. There's nothing that we can't achieve if we do it collectively, because it's the only political effect which is transformative. we'd like to remind you of the words of our master Audre Lorde, when more than 50 years ago she said, "Silence will not protect us. Therefore, now and always, Gora Borroka Feminista." Power to feminist women. I would like to ask the colleagues and representatives of the different associations to please accompany me here when I read the manifest. Please, thank you. Thank you, colleagues. There is a wall in our industry made of silence and complicity. We are here to say loud and clear that the violence against women and gender-based dissenting opinions in our sector cannot continue being silenced nor ignored. This is the reason that 7 feminist associations of the audiovisual sector throughout Spanish territory come together today. AMA from Andalusia, AMMA from Murcia, Dones Cinema from Valencia, Dones Visuals from Catalonia, MN from the Basque Country, and the state CIMA and MIA, Association of Women Filmmakers. Between all of us, we've created networks and we contribute to break a well-established silence for too long. We know it is only the tip of the iceberg. The data is strong and overwhelming. More than half of the women who work in the Spanish audiovisual industry have suffered some kind of sexual violence. 92% remain in silence. Our industry is accomplice and perpetuates the system. Our sector prioritizes the continuity of our projects over our safety and pain. It is the lack of credibility when we talk, the mistrust in reporting channels, the absence of effective mechanisms. It is labor pressure and fear of reprisals. This violence has an appalling effect on our work and on our lives. This violence particularly affects those who cross multiple axes of oppression: racialized, working-class women and dissident identities, functional diversity, older or younger people face additional pressures that increase their vulnerability and make it even more difficult to break the silence. These are not isolated cases. Sexual violence is systemic and structural. Sexual violence is the expression of a political, economic, cultural, and social environment that tolerates it and repudiates them. They represent the violation of human rights that has persisted for decades, invisible, standardized, and discredited. Therefore, the fight against this violence requires strong and sustained political and social commitment. Each association is taking measures in its own territory, but we all share the same need and aim. We demand effective structural changes for the sake of a professional coexistence equal and free from any kind of violence. And therefore, we demand to the public administrations, producers, distributors, festivals, TVs, schools, and academies to adopt protocols and equal policies with mechanisms of denunciation to ensure the independent external to approve this and guarantee specific budgets against sexual violence sector, develop state framework and protocol and a special observatory to ensure the independent external bodies to oversee compliance and presence of producers from dismissing the compliance, compulsory training and prevention for the whole sector, alternative tools that allow without the need to bring cases to court, to organizations, the sectors of producers and distributors, adopt ethical codes and public commitments against sexual violence, execute them, ensuring and or redefining training on sexual harassment and violence, ensuring that they are mandatory for all teams face-to-face. We've opened windows and doors of school where we're all together. From all this, we have built a common house, a network of trust and understanding. Today, we are here because this violence is the responsibility of the entire industry. And therefore, we call on all people involved in the sector that one day we can say and we can work in an industry free of violence. Thank you.